In the dark corners of ancient Jewish folklore lies a terrifying entity known as a Dybbuk. This malicious spirit wanders the earthly realm, seeking a human host to possess. It is said to be the disembodied soul of a wicked person. Legends warn that these restless spirits can be trapped inside ordinary physical objects through sacred rituals. The story of the most famous haunted object in the modern era begins in the quiet city of Portland, Oregon. In the fall of 2001, an antique dealer named Kevin Mannis attended a local estate sale. He searched for unique items to sell in his shop. He noticed an unassuming wooden wine cabinet resting quietly. The estate sale belonged to a Jewish woman named Havilah, who had recently passed away at the age of 103. She was a survivor of the horrors of World War II. After surviving the Holocaust, she immigrated to the United States. She brought almost nothing with her except this strange wooden wine cabinet. The granddaughter of the deceased woman approached Kevin as he examined the plain wooden box. She explained that her grandmother had always kept the cabinet firmly locked. Havilah insisted that a terrible spirit lived inside the dark wood. She called the entity a Dybbuk and demanded that the box must never be opened under any circumstances. Despite the grim warning, Kevin purchased the box for his antique furniture restoration shop. He did not believe in ancient curses or wandering spirits. He viewed the wooden cabinet as nothing more than a profitable piece of inventory. He brought the dusty object back to his workshop and prepared to clean the mysterious antique wine box. Kevin carried the cabinet into the basement of his shop and unlocked the small doors. The hinges creaked loudly in the empty room. Inside the box, he discovered a strange collection of items. He found 2 pennies from the 1920s, a dried rosebud, a golden wine goblet, and a single cast iron candlestick holder. He also discovered 2 distinct locks of human hair, bound tightly with string. One lock consisted of blonde hair, and the other was dark brown. The bizarre collection resembled tools used in a binding ritual. A sudden wave of cold air washed over Kevin as he stared at the strange artifacts resting inside the wooden box. The haunting activity began almost immediately after the seal was broken. Kevin left the shop to run an errand and returned to a scene of absolute devastation. The lights in the basement were completely shattered. The heavy scent of cat urine and jasmine flowers filled the air. A massive unseen force had destroyed his entire workspace. The terrified employee, who had been left alone in the shop, refused to speak about what she witnessed. She ran from the building in tears and never returned to work. Kevin brushed off the strange event as an act of vandalism. He refused to connect the terrifying destruction to the antique wine cabinet sitting upstairs. A few weeks later, Kevin decided to to give the restored wooden cabinet to his mother for her birthday. She was delighted with the antique gift and placed it in her living room. Within 5 minutes of receiving the mysterious box, she collapsed onto the floor. She had suffered a massive and unexpected sudden stroke that afternoon. While recovering in the hospital, his mother demanded that Kevin remove the evil box from her home. She could not speak clearly, but she managed to write a terrifying message on a piece of paper. She wrote that the wooden cabinet was completely full of pure hatred. Kevin finally realized that the antique object carried danger. Desperate to rid himself of the cursed item, Kevin tried giving the cabinet to his sister. She kept the box for only 1 week before returning it. She complained that the cabinet doors would randomly fly open in the middle of the night. She also felt unseen, eyes watching her from the dark corners of her home. Kevin then offered the haunted antique to his brother, who also returned it shortly after. The brother experienced overwhelming feelings of dread whenever he stood near the strange wooden box. He claimed the surrounding air always smelled strongly of jasmine flowers. Every family member who touched the object suffered from profound misfortune and terrible physical ailments. With no other options, Kevin brought the wine cabinet back to his own house. The terrifying supernatural encounters immediately escalated to a dangerous new level. Kevin began suffering from horrific nightmares every single night. In his terrible dreams, he found himself being brutally beaten by an incredibly hideous old woman with glowing yellow demonic eyes. Kevin soon discovered that his sister and brother were experiencing the exact same nightmares of the demonic old hag. When Kevin woke up from these night terrors, he found real physical bruises covering his arms and legs. The malicious entity attached to the box was no longer just causing bad luck, but inflicting actual physical harm. The entity began manifesting in the waking world as dark shadow figures moving rapidly through his hallways. Kevin caught glimpses of tall, dark shapes darting out of his peripheral vision. The persistent smells of cat urine and dying flowers permeated his home. He felt a constant, invisible weight pressing down tightly on his chest every day. Exhausted and completely terrified, Kevin decided he had to permanently banish the object from his life. In the summer of 2003, he listed the wooden cabinet on a popular internet auction website. He wrote a detailed description of every supernatural event that had occurred. He warned potential buyers that the box carried an ancient curse. A college student named Iosif Nyetsk purchased the haunted wooden box from the auction website. Iosif lived in a shared house with several roommates. He did not believe the scary stories and thought the antique would make a great conversation piece. He brought the cursed object into his home and placed it in his small bedroom. The strange phenomena instantly infected the house of the young college student. The electrical devices in the home began malfunctioning for no logical reason. The lights flickered wildly, and the television channels changed completely on their own. Iosif noticed the signature smell of jasmine flowers drifting mysteriously through the cold hallways of the shared rental house. The supernatural attacks quickly turned vicious and personal. Iosif began losing large clumps of his hair as his physical health rapidly deteriorated. His roommates complained of hearing unseen footsteps pacing back and forth across the wooden floors late at night. They all began suffering from the same shared nightmares involving the terrifying demonic old hag entity. One evening, Iosif and his roommates watched a dark, shadowy mass gather in the corner of their living room. The thick shadow seemed to absorb all the light in the house. The temperature plummeted, and a swarm of large black insects suddenly poured out from the floorboards. The terrified students realized the ancient curse was absolutely real. Fearing for his life and his sanity, Iosif immediately listed the Dybbuk box back on the internet auction website. He desperately pleaded for someone to take the cursed object away from him. He openly stated that the entity was destroying his health and ruining his life. The dark legend of the haunted cabinet continued to grow larger. A museum director named Jason Haxton won the new auction. He worked in the medical field and possessed a deep fascination with strange historical artifacts. Jason believed he could scientifically analyze the wooden box and debunk the wild claims of supernatural activity. He had no idea what kind of ancient evil he was inviting into his home. The moment Jason opened the delivery package, he immediately felt a sudden drop in the room temperature. The familiar pungent smells of cat urine and old jasmine flowers filled his private office. He examined the strange binding objects hidden inside the cabinet. He carefully touched the pennies, the goblet, and the peculiar locks of bound human hair. Jason suffered a violent physical reaction the very next day. He woke up with blurry vision and a terrifying metallic taste lingering in his mouth. He began coughing up blood and experienced sudden extreme fatigue that left him unable to work. His entire body broke out in terrible, painful welts that medical doctors could not correctly diagnose. The haunted box began terrorizing Jason and his entire family at home. His young son reported hearing a mysterious voice whispering from the shadows near the basement stairs. The family woke up multiple times to the sounds of breaking glass and heavy footsteps. Shadowy figures constantly moved through the dark hallways of their previously quiet, peaceful home. Jason realized the terrible danger he had brought to his family. He placed the wine cabinet into a secure container and moved it to a storage facility outside of town. However, the physical distance did not stop the relentless supernatural attacks. The demonic entity had already latched onto his life force and continued draining his physical health. Desperate to save his family, Jason reached out to local Jewish scholars and spiritual leaders. He studied ancient Hebrew texts, looking for any information regarding the containment of wandering spirits. He learned that a Dybbuk is an incredibly stubborn, malicious force. Banishing the ancient spirit would require a specialized protective ritual performed by trained religious experts. Jason contacted a group of rabbis who possessed knowledge of Kabbalistic spiritual practices. They traveled to the storage facility to examine the haunted wooden cabinet. The religious leaders immediately sensed a dark, overwhelming presence lingering around the antique object. They agreed that a powerful, malevolent soul was desperately trying to escape its wooden prison to cause chaos. The rabbis prepared a solemn, binding ritual to forcefully seal the dark entity back inside the wooden cabinet. They gathered around the cursed artifact and chanted ancient Hebrew prayers of protection. They burned sacred incense to cleanse the spiritual atmosphere of the room. The men commanded the wandering spirit to return to the dark abyss of slumber. During the intense sealing ritual, the air in the storage unit grew freezing cold. The heavy wooden doors of the antique cabinet rattled violently against their metal hinges. A loud, horrible shrieking sound echoed off the concrete walls of the small room. The rabbis continued their holy prayers without showing any signs of fear or spiritual weakness. Slowly, the violent shaking of the wooden box began to subside. The terrible, unnatural smells of cat urine and jasmine flowers faded away into nothingness. The oppressive, dark atmosphere finally lifted from the enclosed storage room. The religious leaders carefully closed the cabinet doors and permanently sealed them shut using a specialized holy wax and ancient prayers. Following the successful binding ritual, Jason experienced an immediate, miraculous recovery. His terrible physical symptoms vanished overnight, and his eyesight returned to normal. The horrible nightmares of the demonic old hag completely stopped haunting his sleep. The dark shadows no longer darted across the hallways of his house, and his terrified family finally found lasting spiritual peace. Jason decided to lock the sealed Dybbuk box inside a military-grade, specialized containment unit. He buried the heavy container in an undisclosed secret location, far away from the public. He vowed never to reveal the exact hiding place to anyone. He wanted to ensure that no curious person would ever accidentally unleash the ancient, malicious spirit. The terrifying story of the Dybbuk box quickly spread across the entire world. It inspired countless books and major cinematic horror films. Paranormal investigators and curious believers constantly begged Jason to let them examine the haunted object. He refused every single request because he truly understood the immense danger of disturbing the sleeping demonic entity trapped inside. Many skeptics argue that the entire legend is nothing more than a brilliant modern myth. They claim the original antique dealer invented the ghost story to sell a cheap wooden box for a massive profit. They point out that human suggestion and extreme paranoia can easily cause people to experience phantom illnesses and terrifying shared group hallucinations. Yet those who actually interacted with the cursed cabinet maintain that the pure evil was absolutely real. The physical bruises, the unexplained electrical failures, and the foul, unnatural smells cannot be easily dismissed as mere active imagination. The antique wooden box carried a dark, heavy energy that actively ruined the lives of everyone who dared to touch it. The origins of the demonic spirit remain shrouded in historical tragedy and mystery. The original owner, Havila, survived the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust in Europe. Some spiritual researchers believe that the massive trauma and massive loss of life created a spiritual vacuum. This dark void allowed a demonic entity to enter the physical world through grief. According to ancient folklore, the ritual to trap a Dybbuk requires great sacrifice and specific binding materials. The pennies, the dried rose, the golden goblet, and the human hair were not random pieces of junk. They were the precise mystical elements needed to anchor a dangerous wandering soul to a physical object like the wooden wine cabinet. If Havila or her ancestors successfully trapped a demon inside the box, they performed a great service to humanity. Opening the doors broke the sacred seal and allowed the ancient evil to roam free once again. The simple act of curious inspection unleashed a wave of terror that spanned multiple states and affected dozens of innocent people. The specific smell of jasmine flowers remains one of the most chilling details of the entire paranormal legend. In many ancient mystical traditions, jasmine is heavily associated with the spirits of the dead and the dark underworld. The sweet, dying floral scent served as a warning sign that the veil between the living and the dead had torn. The terrifying old hag from the shared nightmares also connects deeply to European mythological traditions. She represents a classic form of a spiritual parasite that feeds heavily on human fear and physical energy. The entity used the terrifying dream state to weaken the minds of its victims before launching severe physical attacks in the waking daytime world. Today, the Dybbuk box sits hidden in total darkness inside its buried container. The holy wax seal remains intact, and the ancient Hebrew prayers continue to hold the malicious force at bay. However, a lingering sense of dark dread surrounds the infamous legend. Many paranormal experts wonder how long the simple wooden prison can contain the demon. Spiritual bindings are rarely permanent solutions according to ancient religious texts. The wood will eventually rot, and the protective holy wax will slowly degrade over the passing centuries. The dark entity trapped inside does not age and never grows tired. It simply waits in the silent blackness for another foolish person to open the small wooden doors. Some paranormal investigators worry that the immense public attention has actually made the entity much stronger. Believers argue that talking about a demon gives it spiritual energy and increased influence over the mortal realm. Every time the story of the cursed cabinet is retold, the sleeping entity receives a tiny spark of dark power in its prison. There are rumors that similar Dybbuk boxes exist hidden away in forgotten attics and dusty estate sales. The trauma of the past century may have trapped many restless, malicious spirits inside mundane, everyday objects. The legend serves as a grim warning to anyone who buys antique items without knowing their true dark history and hidden spiritual baggage. Antique dealers and collectors now share the story of the cursed cabinet as a cautionary tale. They warn new buyers to trust their instincts when examining old objects. If a wooden box feels unnaturally cold or smells of dying flowers, it is best to walk away quickly. Some closed doors are meant to stay locked shut forever. Mannis, the man who first opened the cabinet, still reflects on the terrifying ordeal with deep regret. He wishes he had listened to the desperate warnings of the grieving granddaughter. He learned the hard way that disrespecting ancient folklore can invite unimaginable horror into an ordinary life. His curiosity nearly cost him his health and sanity. The story of the mysterious Dybbuk box forces us to confront the uncomfortable boundaries between modern skepticism and ancient religious belief. It reminds us that our ancestors possessed a profound understanding of dark spiritual forces that we have arrogantly forgotten. We dismiss their terrifying cautionary tales and protective rituals as mere superstitions at our own great peril. Somewhere deep underground, the small antique wine cabinet remains buried and forgotten by the general public. The pennies, the rosebud, and the bound hair rest quietly inside the dark wood. The demonic entity slumbers beneath the earth, waiting for its next human victim. The ancient spirit of Jewish folklore simply bides its time in the shadows.